progress through this process slowly, methodically, do it right. Because if this is the car you drive to work every day that you put out on the racetrack, you don't want to make the phone call I made to my wife saying, "Hey, honey, can you drive an hour and come and get me, please? Because I just destroyed my car."
You're listening to Drive Sport, the amateur track driver podcast. Here's your host, DMC.
Hello and welcome to Drive Sport. My name's Dave, but for this show I go by DMC, and I'm here to talk to you about how you can get on the track, have fun on the track, and get your car home in one piece. And the person that I'm about to talk to is someone who's been absolutely instrumental in my journey. I would consider him my number one mentor for this, and I'm really thrilled that you're getting a chance to learn from him as well. This is Perry Needham. Perry, how are you doing?
I'm great, Dave, and just thrilled to be a part of this. Thank you.
So you've been influential in my life in terms of being a coach. You've coached my wife. You've coached my son. You've coached me on a personal level where I've hired you to do that one-on-one and also at various events at the track. For instance, the Lotus driving experience. So for those who are not familiar with you, can you give a little bit of background into your racing and track experience?
Absolutely, love to. I've been a passionate fan of motorsports my entire life. I was influenced heavily by my father, who also loved cars and driving and motorsports. I can remember gearing up and watching the Indy 500 with him as a kid, or Formula One racing, or motorcycle racing. We just all loved racing. And so I had a go-kart as a young child. Ran that all the time, had a great time, never got into racing until later with go-karting. We'll talk about that because karting is a fundamental piece of the progression for most drivers. And you'll find that even Formula One and top-level drivers still go-karting all the time. It's great for your driving. But then I really got serious about my driving when I moved to Utah. And in 2006, when Larry Miller built Miller Motorsports Park, which is now, I believe it's Burt Brothers Motorsports at this point. And at that point, what Larry had built was ideal because it was designed to be a community racetrack and a motorsports park, which I've always liked that. It was designed so that people of all walks of life could come out and enjoy some form of being on an actual racetrack in a safe, controlled environment, whether that be in their own personal car or in a fully tuned high-performance race car. And so I had the pleasure of doing both. I started, like many people do, in a street car that I started tuning for the track. And then by the end of my progression over, about 20 years, from 2006 to almost 2026, I drove everything in between and even was a driver manager for a Porsche race team and raced a Porsche GT3 Cup, won multiple championships, both in NASA, Utah and Porsche Club of America, and had the pleasure of going with the team to race at tracks around the country. And so I had the full gamut of the experience and also continued to do a lot of competitive karting with another local team.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what a varied history you have and so much experience in a variety of different ways. So what I'd like to do, Perry, for these interviews is put myself in the shoes of a person who's listening, somebody who wants to get into performance driving on the track. And where I want to start with you is, what do you think is the first step? I mean, you mentioned karting, you mentioned racing. I know you've done some autocross as well. What is a good first step for someone who's never done this before?
Oh, that's a great question. I think karting is a really simple, quick way to find out if this is something for you. And the beauty of that is if you go to really any medium to large size city in the country, you'll find kart tracks. Sometimes they're indoor, sometimes they're outdoor, sometimes they're just for fun. Some of them are electric. You think of like K1 Speed as a big chain. They have kart tracks all over the country. Great way to get in a performance automobile. It really is. It's a small car. And get some basic skills, find out if you enjoy the speed, the acceleration, the cornering. And if you do, it's a great starting point. Then from there, or for people there are a lot of people who, for whatever reason, don't want to do karting. I'm sure you've experienced this too.
Yeah, it wasn't my first step.
Right. For a lot of people, it isn't. For a lot of people, they really yearn to get on a racetrack. And there's nothing wrong with going to a local racetrack and looking into their track day programs. They'll have like an amateur track day. They'll have what we refer to as HPDE, high performance driving education. They'll have a local club, be it NASA, National Auto Sports Association, or it could be SCCA, the Sports Car Club of America.
Yeah.
They're involved at almost every racetrack. They probably are at every racetrack in the country, and they will set up events to help people get started. And you don't even necessarily have to go out on the racetrack. You mentioned autocross. Autocross, self-cross, if you will, right, is where you have individual timed events, and the local club, again, being it usually SCCA, but other states, they set up their own car clubs. They'll set up a course of cones. And we often refer to it as a sea of cones because that's what it looks like when you first get there. But it'll be a series of S turns and different challenges that they'll build into the course for you. And you can take literally almost any street car and drive a 30 or a 60-second autocross course. And you're essentially racing against the clock and against the other drivers who are also trying to set their best possible lap time in one single lap. And then you queue up and go again. And it's a lot of fun, great basic skills, not too hard on your car, something that literally almost anybody can do very easily and very inexpensively.
Oh,
So I would
yeah.
say karting, autocross, and track days, those are great ways for anyone to get involved in performance driving.
And one group I'm sure you would mention that you just didn't, that I want to pay attention to is Porsche Club of America, or another enthusiast car club where they have events. They'll also have autocross, maybe. And they also have their track days, which is another viable option. So you were such an influential coach for me, and especially for my son. I want people to get a little bit of the Perry Needham experience. And one of those things that I love is that you always emphasize safety. I've worked with a lot of different coaches, and I would put you probably at the top of the list in terms of focusing on safety first, on getting onto the track. So let's get in the car with you for a second, Perry. And what are some of the first things that you would tell me to make sure I do so that I have a safe experience for my first time on the track?
Wow. Well, first, thank you for that. I'm thrilled to hear that because safety is paramount. People don't necessarily think about the physics of what's going on when we drive any kind of a vehicle, 2 wheels, 4 wheels of any size or shape. When you get moving, 30 miles an hour, 60 miles an hour, 100 or more, there's a lot going on there. And when you have a collision, and anyone who's been in any kind of a collision knows, it is not something you want to do.
Yeah.
It's not a nice thing. And collisions cause injuries. And so the most important thing, first of all, is whatever vehicle it is you're going to be driving, make sure that vehicle is in very good working condition. And if that requires a quick trip to your local shop there, and like you mentioned, the car clubs are great about that too. They'll help you find someone who can do a quick safety inspection on the car. Make sure the tires are in good shape. Make sure the brakes are in good shape. And brakes are number one, because if you have brake fade because your brake fluid is old, your brake pads are gone, your rotors are gone, you lose your brakes in almost any driving situation. I've seen go-karts go right through fences because they lost their brakes. I've seen massive crashes at the racetrack because they lost their brakes. You can survive bald tires. Okay, we all do it. But you lose your brakes, there's not a lot you can do. You're in big trouble. So brakes are paramount, tires, suspension, steering, all of those things that control the inputs of the car, the inputs you're making to the vehicle, those have to be in great working order.
It's interesting. I just had a conversation with James Jenkins, who I don't know whether this interview is going to air before or after that, but I asked him, what are the first things that you need to have done? And he brought up in particular brake fluid. And I remember when we met at the Lotus Experience, now at Burt Brothers Motor Park, and you mentioned to me to make sure that the brake fluid was good, that it was racing brake fluid. And at the moment, it just sort of went over my head because I was so inexperienced. And the concept of even brake fluid boiling seemed weird to me. And then later on, I learned, oh my gosh, now I am an instructor. And that's the first thing that I want everyone to take care of when they go onto the track.
Absolutely. It's paramount. And so we look at the external of the car, right? And the individual input systems, braking, steering, suspension, etc. Then we go to the interior of the car, right? It has to be safe as well. You got to have excellent, good working seat belts. One of the first things I do with a new driver, especially on the track, is I look at their seating position. And I don't just do this on the track. It's kind of funny. When I was working with Ford as an instructor, I can't tell you how many times I would have particularly smaller people, and particularly usually short women, like around 5 feet, would come driving up to me, and I'd look in the window and I could barely see them. I'd say,
yeah.
okay,
Wow.
First thing we're going to do before we even get started today is we're going to work on your driving position. And so as instructors, we all learn to do that. We get people to where they can reach the controls perfectly, be that the steering wheel, the pedals, shifting if needed, but also visibility. Because as you've heard me say 1,000 times, vision is everything.
Yes.
And this is true not just in motorsports, in basically every sport that involves speed, skiing, bicycles, you name it, vision is everything. And so I really work with people to make sure they can get a really good visualization of what they're looking at down the track, get them to look as far ahead as possible, their mirrors and everything else.
Yeah, so let's break this down into those two sections for a moment. Let's slow it down and walk us through, first of all, seat position. What does that mean? What are you looking for? What would you encourage someone listening to this to do?
So the first thing we do is we put you in the car and we make sure that you can put your hands over the steering wheel, not on the steering wheel, but literally over it, to where the steering wheel is hitting you right at your wrists. And if you can just let your hands droop over the steering wheel, then your distance from your body to the steering wheel should be about right. And then when you grasp the steering wheel at either 3 and 9 or 10 and 2, not 80, 100 different ways I've seen people grab steering wheels.
I call it the Vin Diesel, right?
Yes.
The one where the hands are up on the top of the steering wheel because it looks good on the camera.
Oh, yeah.
Not that one.
Oh, yeah. They have the one-hander with the arm out the window.
Yeah.
We have another favorite in instructing we call the hooker. And we tease people that they are hookers. And they are some of our most feared driving position people because they reach underneath with their hand and grab the top of the steering wheel. So picture your palm.
Wow.
And they grab the wheel like that and they try to steer like that. And it creates a really dangerous situation, even in your street driving, because they can only turn the steering a little bit. And then God forbid, if they're in a collision, the airbag is right behind their arm and their arm slams into their own face. So these are critical safety points in how you drive. Even in street driving, I'll pick on my wife and kids if I see them without good hand position on the steering wheel.
And how about seat position and legs? What are you looking for with that?
Same thing with that. We make sure that when they're seated, they can press both pedals completely to the floor, or all three pedals if there's a clutch. You want the seat close enough to where you can do that, and then tilt it back at the right angle to get that steering wheel position we talked about. And then the critical aspect we talked about a minute ago is height. Too many people want to sit way down low in the car. And in a very serious race car, especially like an open wheel car or something like that, it is critical to get your body weight as low as you can, because that affects the center of gravity, the balance of the car. But in most normal driving, you want your height enough to where your visualization is excellent. You can really see out the entire windscreen, and then also, of course, the rearview mirror and the side mirrors. And mirrors are a whole nother topic. We could spend 20 minutes on having your mirrors set up correctly for great driving.
Yeah, one thing I want to call out here, and I say it to my students, I can't remember if I got it from you, Perry, is that the seating position for performance driving is not designed for your comfort. When we daily drive, we can lean back. We have a more relaxed position with our arms and with our legs. But when we're performance driving, we want leverage. We want to be up nice and tight, so we've got full control over the wheels. Would you agree with that statement?
Oh, yeah, beautifully put. Yeah, if you can't easily control the vehicle when you're under lateral G-forces and forward and backward G-forces, when we start to drive the car, even at 50 to 60% of the car's capability, we're moving around in that automobile a lot. And so that brings up the next thing probably one of the most critical things, which is the belting, right? Because even your factory 3-point seat belt, you want it right, you want it tight. And if I remember right, Dave, you used a little device on your belts before you went to a harness that allowed you to lock in that 3-point seat belt to hold you more firmly in the seat.
Yeah, well, it brings up the fact that the first car that I was really tracking on a regular basis was a Porsche Cayman, a 2010 Cayman S. It was a 987.2, and they had leather seats, really nice, beautiful leather seats. But the problem was when you have beautiful, nice leather seats and you're on the track, you're sliding all over the place. And so, yeah, that was one of the first things that I did is I looked for a device that allowed the seatbelt to lock in a little bit more. Now, I've since learned that if you're going to use something like that, you also want to use a Hans device because the seatbelt isn't going to move enough. So I hesitate to recommend that fully, but the ideal at some point is we're getting ourselves into a harness, but we don't have to have that immediately. What's your take?
Right. I agree. And it's a function of performance, right? As speeds increase and as the risk factors grow, and we're back to safety again, which, you know me, I'm going to be there all the time. You start to drive at very high speeds. You need to start really thinking about a better seat, a proper racing harness, which are not very expensive upgrades. You can get a relatively inexpensive racing seat and a good harness, and it'll make a dramatic difference in your driving and your safety. And then from there, we get into roll bars, roll cages, fire suppression, all the different things that when you start to get really serious, you really don't have a choice because the organizations that are going to allow you to race on the track are going to have strict rules around those safety items.
Yeah, that's the balance that I'm trying to strike with this show, is we want people to get into the sport. And so initially, it's okay. You can take your car out on the track, make sure that it's safe, like you said, in a good condition. But you can take your car out on the track. Then the more you progress, then you're going to want to add these things. So what I'm saying is I don't want the lack of these things to be a hesitation for someone to be in the sport and give it a try. I mean, after all, Lexus, which we did together, by the way, the Lexus Performance Driving School and Porsche, they put street cars out on the track. But they typically do it with you wearing something like a helmet at the very least.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the last thing I was going to mention on the safety point is if there's one piece of equipment you basically have to have the minute you head out on an actual racetrack or even for karting, you have to have a good helmet. And it makes me sad because I often see people scrimp on a helmet. They'll buy an old used helmet or a very inexpensive helmet. This is your head, your brain we're talking about. So you can buy a very good helmet for a few $100s, and there's no reason to skimp on that. So that's probably the most critical piece of equipment because modern cars are built really well. To your point, you can take almost any good street car out on a racetrack and really enjoy yourself and be very safe. But there's that one piece of equipment you got to have, and that's a good helmet.
Yeah, and you're right. It doesn't have to be expensive. They don't sponsor the show, at least not yet, but I'll just say that I started with RaceQuip helmets. They're inexpensive helmets that are certified to the latest standards, and we have a bunch of those in my family, and it works out for all of us. So yeah, don't scrimp on that, or at least renting it from the track. Okay, so let's move from the seating to the actual driving performance. I've heard it said that the best modification you can make is the one that's between the steering wheel and the seat, right? So talk to us about what's the first place that you start with coaching. What do you say to someone when they're getting out on the track for the first time?
Well, hopefully, and in most cases, we have time to prep in the classroom or at the very least in the pit lane before we even head out on the racetrack, because there are basic, simple things about driving on a track that are very different from just driving in traffic on the street. Okay. And again, I'm going to constantly go back to vision because you have to start right away getting people to visualize their car on the track, how fast they're going to build speed, because it can happen quickly and people can get in trouble real easily. And that visualization can even start in the classroom, typically with a track map, right? Most people have never been on that particular racetrack before, and you and I may have thousands of laps there. We hardly even think
Yes.
about it anymore. We know the track like the back of our hand. But someone brand new, and I've seen this many times, they really struggle with where am I supposed to be on the track and interconnecting the various turns, and then things like the braking zones and how to get on and off the racetrack. There's pit out and pit in, and which lane should I be in when I come into the pit lane. So we have a lot of good discussion about that before we head right out onto the racetrack.
I think that's a great point. One thing that I would add to is if you're going on the track for the first time, pull up YouTube videos and look at them and watch someone do that line over and over. So again, I mentioned the Lexus Performance Driving School. You and I did that together as buddies. We went to Road Atlanta. And first of all, I spent a ton of time watching people do laps. I would probably watch the same video dozens of times. And then, of course, if you have the option, driving it on a sim so that when you get to the track, at the very least, the corners don't surprise you.
Absolutely.
And the elevation changes don't surprise you. And then we can focus on technique.
Right. And that's what pro drivers do too. You look at an F1 team, they have massive multi-million-dollar simulators, and those drivers know that track intimately before they ever put a wheel on it. The other thing you can often do is walk the racetrack. And that's actually a really fun thing to do. A lot of clubs will let you go out and do a track walk with an instructor who will talk you through it. Or at the very least, a lap, and I highly recommend this, the instructor should take you out first. And you should be comfortable letting the instructor do that. And if you're not comfortable with the instructor driving your car at speed, that's fine. Just tell them that. Just say, I want you to take me on a nice, easy lap, just so you can show me the line. And I have found that to be an incredibly valuable tool. And then they get comfortable too. They see that the car is handling the conditions, the speed, the braking. They see our inputs. So I think a couple of pace laps with an instructor are huge before you ever go out on the track yourself.
Now, with this show, we're targeting people who are the drivers, but at some point they might want to be instructors as well. So I just want to point out, what's the one thing that you told me you should never do as an instructor when you're taking someone on the track for their first lap or two?
Oh, I'm really glad you brought that up because I've seen so many instructors do this. Yeah. So as instructors and as drivers, and I spent many years instructing, especially after I slowed down on my racing, you can't help but want to show people the capability that you've developed and also the capability of the car. And it's not unusual for someone to show up at the track in a brand new Corvette ZR8 or a Ferrari or a beautiful Porsche, and you get to drive that car. And so here's the scenario you're describing. So I tell instructors, to straight up answer your question, I tell an instructor, you should never show a student a full, what we would call a 10/10ths lap until you've known that person a very long time. You've driven with like you and me to the point where you're like, okay, Perry, show me what the car can do. Show me what you can show. That should very, very rarely occur. I push instructors to give laps at 6/10ths, 7/10ths, and probably no more than that. And if an instructor takes you right out off the bat and is driving the car right at its limits of control, I would look for another instructor, just straight up, because he's more interested in channeling his ego and showing you what he can do than in developing you as a driver. Because the basic problem with that is real simple. Then the student's going to get in the car and try to duplicate what you just did, and that student could get in serious trouble and could get hurt or killed.
Yeah, we do not want that to happen. And I've seen it. You've probably seen it, where you're taking them on a hot lap, and what do? They lean over and they look at the speedometer. And they say, oh, that's the speed they're driving at. I need to get to that point. And we are not even close to that point. So, what I want to emphasize for both sides, for the student and the instructor, as the student, don't expect your instructor to throw the car around the track at full speed. Expect them to show you a nice, clean line. And as instructors, let's show a clean line. So that's nice and slow and controlled, so that we give the student the place where they should be now, not where they should be a year from now when they have 1,000 laps on the course.
Yeah, perfectly said. The other reason I really like to do a couple of pace laps, as we'll call it, learning the line type laps with a new student. It also gives me a chance to check out his or her car, because now I can
Yes.
feel, how do those brakes feel? How does the steering feel? Are the tires in good shape? Are they properly inflated? Good instructors will have a tire gauge handy, because I can't tell you how many times I've come to the track and found tires that weren't properly inflated. Let's face it, most people don't take the time every day to properly manage their tire inflation. And so you get to a racetrack where the tire is going to work a lot harder and it's going to get hot. You need to have proper inflation. And so I can check all those things out in the car on a nice, easy lap, and then come into the pits and say, hey, there are a couple things we need to address before we put you in the seat and really get going.
Oh, that's such a good point. I mean, several times I've had assumptions about someone's car before I drive it, and then I go and drive it, and I go, oh, okay, I'm going to readjust what I was telling you. This car is lighter than I thought, or heavier than I thought, and so we need to change our approach to some things. And I also want to call out what you said. The first piece of equipment that I bought was a good tire gauge, because I kept seeing that was such a factor. So I would recommend that to everyone. Get yourself a good tire gauge and take it to the track experience. That's great stuff.
And if you want to take that to the next level, you can also buy these wonderful little inflation guns now, right? They look like a drill driver, but they're little tire inflators. And you can actually set the correct pressure on those, hook them up to the tire, and boom, get the proper inflation. So those two pieces of equipment are critical for anybody, even for your daily driver. And so great stuff. The other thing you kind of triggered in my head there was different types of cars, right? So we have big, heavy cars like Corvettes and Mustangs, Camaros, things like that. We have super light cars like the Lotus, like a Spec Miata or a Street Miata, either one. We have rear-wheel drive. We have front-wheel drive. We have mid-engine cars. And as instructors, we need to understand how each of those cars drive differently and how to help the students understand that so they keep the car balanced and in great shape on the track.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, so now we're on the track. For the first time, you're the student, you're going out on this track, and let's say they have a little bit of familiarity. Their seating position is right. What are some of the things that you're going to instruct them to do as they're taking this car out?
Okay, so we can all picture ourselves now. We're excited, we're nervous, we're in the pit lane. We're going to roll down the track to the flag marshal, who's going to instruct us whether or not we can enter the track. They're very important for our safety. They give us the green flag and they send us out onto the racetrack. So we go down what we call the pit out lane. We're entering the racetrack now, and we've got to start thinking about this. This is an active racetrack. There are other cars out there generally that are going usually at significant speeds. So the first thing we've got to do is go right back to the eyes again. Visualization. Check mirrors, check for the track, look where other cars are on the track. Then we start to visualize the line, and we all talk about the proper line, the racing line on a racetrack, which is generally keeping the car well to one side of the track, which most tracks in North America are counterclockwise. We run, and the Brits would call it anti-clockwise. It's interesting.
Oh,
and
interesting.
So you generally go down the right edge of the racetrack, and then you're going to start visualizing the braking point of the corner, the middle of the corner, what we call the apex, which is where we turn into, and then the exit of the corner, which is where we let the car run out, track out. These are tricky concepts for people to understand because they're very different from street driving.
Yes.
And so next time you drive on the street, watch people come up to an intersection and watch where they slow down and watch where they turn in. I laugh because I see people cut across intersections all the time. They cut right across the crosswalks. They cut right across the left turn lane for the oncoming traffic, because what are they doing? They're all turning in too early. Okay. So as instructors, we emphasize patience. Get the car down into the turn. Don't turn in too early. Learn to turn in later, because that sets a better line through the corner. This is all critical. And this is the stuff, hopefully, we've talked about extensively in a classroom, or at least in the pits with the track map before we go out. And then we coach that a lot with our hands as we're in the car, right? I don't know how many times I reached over in front of you with my left hand and pointing left, going, okay, this is a left turn coming up. We're going to track left. Then the right hand, okay, over here, we're going to track out right. And all about those eyes again, all about the vision. Visualize the car braking smoothly, coming out of the brake smoothly. You're going to hear that word smooth 1,000 times. Turning into that apex and letting that car track out. And after a while, and adding power right as we track out. And so after a while, it starts to click. And there's nothing more gratifying than watching a student start to figure it out and feel it on the track. It's fantastic.
Yeah, that's the best feeling in the world when we see someone experience that and you see the light come on and you go, wow, this is so cool. I'm having so much fun. And the reason why you're having fun is because you're doing things smoothly and correctly and putting the car where it needs to be. I think, I'm terrible at golf, but I think there's one equivalent that you can feel that when you did it right, when you hit the ball right, and you feel that when you do the apex correctly. And that's something I'll always do with my student. When they get it right, I say, did you feel that?
Yep.
How did that feel? And they go, yep. Oh, you're right. That felt great. And I say, okay, let's get that on every corner.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you can probably experience it a whole lot more than with golf if we're using that comparison, right?
Well, it's interesting though, but sports comparisons are great for teaching driving.
Yeah.
I like to ask people, have you ever done any kind of skiing, water skiing, snow skiing?
Yeah.
Have you ever been on roller skates or ice skates? All of those feelings are really similar to driving. And people look at me and go, what do you mean? I'm like, well, what do you do on a snow ski? You edge harder onto the skis. You look where you want to go. You drive those skis through the corner. What happens when you do that? Your balance changes. You start to pick up G-forces. And then as you release the skis and travel off the corner, it's exactly the same feeling as driving. Same thing on, like I say, ice skates. Even riding a bicycle or a motorcycle, you have those same feelings. You lean that bike over to get it to turn, and then you coast out of the corner. Great feeling.
That's a great point for me to bring up. The last principle that I want to talk about, because we can talk for hours about this.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And maybe we're going to come back and do that, right? But for this episode, I want to touch on one more thing, which is vision, right? All those things that you talked about with skiing and biking and everything where your eyes are so important. Can you just sort of expand on that concept for us, Perry?
Oh, absolutely. And everybody's favorite expression, your hands follow your eyes. Where you look, your hands will instinctively turn to that.
Yes.
Next time you hit a pothole, ask yourself why you hit that pothole. Real simple, you looked at it. It's what we call target fixation. Where you look is where you go. And that's true of walking, running, cycling, skiing, driving. And it really impacts driving because of the speed, okay? At 60 miles an hour, we're traveling 88 feet a second. I want to say that again for everybody. 60 miles an hour, you're going 88 feet every second, right? That is something you have to really let sink in. Now, think about those guys going around Indianapolis at 4 times that speed, 240 miles per hour. I can't do 4 times 88 in my head, Dave. What do we get? 350 feet a second, something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, literally more than a football field every second. So if you're not looking way ahead, if you're not planning ahead for what's happening in a car, we refer to it as getting behind the car, right? You're over driving the car. You're not able to react fast enough because that corner is in front of you and you haven't looked ahead and planned for it. And that's when new drivers in particular, and even the most professional race drivers, that's when they get in trouble. They lose vision for a second. They lose focus. We've all seen it in racing. And the next thing they know, they're off the corner. So vision is everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And I found that so many problems that people experience on the track when maybe they aren't being, as I like to use the word fluid rather than smooth, but they're not being as smooth or fluid as they need to be. And very often it's because their eyes are in the wrong place. And you've probably experienced this, Perry. I've had several students where maybe we're experiencing a variety of problems and it's getting too complex. They're overdriving. And I just say, all right, we're going to go back to the basics. We're going to just go back to where your eyes are. And once their eyes start going to the right place and they're not looking just to the next step, but the step beyond it, everything starts to become just more fluid and smoothed out.
Very well said. And to that point, I have to pull myself back in, and you've seen me do it because I've instructed you, and force myself to focus on a couple of things.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to go out there and we're going to do 6 different things at once. We're going to look at corner entry and corner exit and apex, and we're going to look at, we all tend to throw too much at our students. And so.
Yeah, and ourselves.
Absolutely. At one of the last Porsche Club events I did, we had a pro instructor there that I really enjoyed. And he said, hey guys, in your next session, tell your students to focus on one thing, and let's make that one thing corner exit. Because if you exit the corner properly, you probably did a lot of things right. You probably braked really well. You probably turned in at the right point. You probably hit the apex, probably powered out of the corner really well. But guess what? Instead of thinking of those 5 things, let's just focus on corner exit. I went out and did that in my next session with 2 students, and I couldn't believe how well it worked.
I'll have to try that next time.
Yeah, give that a shot, because they have to use their eyes to properly set up for the exit. The exit is really the most critical part of the corner. And so if they get that right, chances are they did everything else really well. It's fun stuff.
Yeah. Well, this is fantastic stuff, Perry. And what I wanted to do for this interview was just to give first timers or people who are getting started, or maybe they've been on the track for a while, but they never got any coaching of any kind.
Right. Happens all the time.
Yeah. And I just want to give them something to think about the next time they go out. And so in the spirit of not doing too many things at once, I'm going to wrap up this interview, but I am going to invite you to come back again in the future if you're okay with that.
Would love to. Absolutely love to. As you said, you and I could talk about this for hours. We have. And it's so much fun, like you say, for me to sit here with you, someone who I met on the track in the Lotus experience. We pretty quickly recognized that you had the skills and the passion to do this. And then you took that and developed it all the way into a very good instructor. You're a very good instructor. And I would actually love to see you actually get into a race one of these days, or at least a time trial. But that's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah. We'll have another conversation about that. In my professional experience, I've learned the value of focus. And one of the things that I've decided I'm focused on in the driving experience is high performance driving. So I want to be the best coach I can be in that category. But, we'll see. We'll see what happens with that.
I love it.
So with every interview, there's a series of questions that I like to ask at the end. The first one is going to be the pit stop question. So we're going to slow down. And then we're going to do some hot lap questions, ones that I just fire at you and I want to get some quick responses.
Oh, I like it.
So here's the pit stop question to wrap this up that everyone wants to learn from. What is the most expensive lesson you've learned? And then that way, maybe someone listening to it can avoid that expensive lesson.
Ooh, okay. Well, I did crash a streetcar badly. Okay. I completely totaled a beautiful little Audi TT early on in my track day experiences. And it happened because I pushed it too hard. I was overdriving. I had not had much proper instruction. I had not maintained my tires. And so I actually had a pretty serious crash out at our local track in Utah. And it was because I wasn't doing the things we just discussed, right? I hadn't really had someone look at the car. I hadn't had a lot of proper instruction, and I overdrove the car. I drove too fast for my own capabilities, and I got in big trouble. So again, just linking back everything we talked about, right? Progress through this process slowly, methodically, do it right. Because if this is the car you drive to work every day that you put out on the racetrack,
yes,
you don't want to make the phone call I made to my wife saying, hey, honey, can you drive an hour and come and get me, please? Because I just destroyed my car. Trust me, you don't want to have that.
Yeah, and that could have been avoided with a little more caution, a little more attention to the fundamental things that we talked about at the beginning, things like the tire, the brakes, and that sort of thing.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, so now let's go into the hot lap questions. I just want quick responses to these questions. Favorite car you've ever driven on the track?
Ooh, wow. Ferrari F8 Tributo.
Wow. Okay.
Amazing car. And just real quick, I'm not a Ferrari guy. I'm a Porsche guy.
Mm.
I mean, I raced Porsches. I love Porsches. You know that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for me to say the best car I ever drove on the racetrack was a Ferrari is a big deal.
Absolutely. It takes a lot to impress Perry. Okay. Bucket list car you haven't driven on the track, but wish you could.
Ooh. Higher level open wheel. I've driven an F4 car on the track thanks to a wonderful guy that you know well at our track, E.R. Karen. He put me in an F4 car. Absolutely loved it. I was dying for more power. I'd love to drive an F3 at some point.
Oh, that's great. I'm going to interview ER here pretty soon. He let me drive his Emira recently.
Oh,
so super generous guy.
Yeah.
Okay, your most proud track driving accomplishment.
Wow, that's a great one. Oh, I hate to be selfish and say GT3 Cup Championship, but God, it felt
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Well, because I beat cars with way more horsepower, like Lamborghini Huracans and Audi ALMSs, in an older, less powerful car. So I had to really drive well to make that happen.
Yeah.
And I had the backing of an amazing racing team, Air Power, and they put me in a great car with a great engineer, and we crushed it. And it was amazing.
That's amazing. Okay, favorite track you've driven on?
Oh, that's easy. That's Laguna Seca, no doubt about it. Laguna is famous, and that's in Northern California, near the beautiful town of Monterey. And if you ever get a chance, anybody listening, if you ever get a chance to drive that track, it has flow. So you mentioned, Dave, about being fluid. Great racetracks have great flow, and you just get into the rhythm of the track, just like you and I did at Road Atlanta has amazing flow. And bucket list tracks, I would absolutely love to drive Road America, Elkhart, which is at Elkhart Lake, Mid-Ohio, Watkins Glen, and I think I've driven most of the other great racetracks in America that I've always wanted to drive.
Oh, that's wonderful. Best piece of driving advice you ever received?
Be smooth. Smooth inputs. Smooth is fast. What's the old expression, Dave? Slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
That's it. Yeah, and it's been popularized in the F1 movie recently.
Yes, and it's so true. If you start to become erratic, if you're overdriving the car, all you're going to do is be slow, be dangerous, and destroy your brakes, your tires, your suspension. The best drivers in the world look like they're not even trying hard. Watch Lewis Hamilton on a hot lap. He just doesn't even look like he's trying because he's so smooth. So be smooth. Be fluid. I like that.
Yeah. I like, was it you that showed me the water bottle analogy?
Yes. Well, and I learned it from lots of others.
And that's why I liked it. I like it because sometimes smooth is an ethereal concept, whereas fluid, I can visualize that. I can see how water flows around the corner. I can see how my car flows back and forth. So that's why I like to say it that way. It's just my personal preference for coaching.
I love it. See, and this is what happens, right? Whenever instructors talk to each other, we pick up new stuff. And so I like that. I like fluid a lot.
Yeah. And then lastly, what's one thing you want every first-time amateur driver to do?
Have a great time. Love it. Enjoy it. Get out there. If it's not for you, you'll figure that out pretty quickly. I've definitely had people who get out on the racetrack and say, you know what, this is just not for me. But boy, that's rare. That is very rare. I would say that's, less than 10%. Most people get out there, start to enjoy it, and I've never seen bigger smiles in my life. So get out there, try it. If you don't like it, no big deal. But everybody should try it once.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't wait for the perfect moment. Just give it a try. Find the next opportunity you can. Perry, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, my friend. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom with us.
Right back at you, Dave. Always a pleasure. And I'm really excited about this program, and I can't wait to see it when it's finished.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Also, if you have questions that you want me to answer on the show, you can send me a message at show@drivesport.co. And if I don't know the answer, I'll find it. And the same thing goes. If you have a guest that you think I should interview, please send that to the same address, show@drivesport.co. Thanks for listening. Eyes up and stay fluid.
You've been listening to Drive Sports, the amateur track driver podcast, hosted by DMC and produced by Drive Sports LLC. Research and assistant production by Victoria Bidez. Music is by Illigot via Premium Beat Licensing. If you have a question, guest suggestion, or a track DMC should visit, please send it to show@drivesport.co. Please subscribe to Drive Sport on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like to get your podcasts. And follow us on social media at Drive Sport Co. We'll see you in the next episode.